Hi guys, welcome back to the Rad Hyrox podcast. Today we're joined by Rich Kirby. He is a performance specialist with a background in strength and conditioning for professional football. He is also an amazing athlete in his own right. He holds a British Hyrox record and is off to the Hyrox World Champs in Nice. And we're super excited today to chat to Rich about all the things he's been doing. So Hyrox, strength and conditioning training, and about the running challenges that he's had lined up or that he's just done, because we know he's just done the London Marathon. So welcome to the podcast, Rich.
Thank you. It's great to be on here. Thank you for having me.
Oh no, our pleasure. Firstly, we wanted to ask how you are. We noticed from Instagram you may have not had the best luck in the world recently, and are you still suffering from a wrist injury?
Yeah, so about 10 days ago now, I managed to break my wrist whilst playing rugby. So funny story, I stopped playing rugby for 6 months to focus on, putting a bit more effort into Hyrox and coming up towards the World Championships, and decided that, you know what, I'll have one last dance, last game of the season, and broke my wrist in 2 places. So yeah, it's put a bit of a different spin on training, but I'm seeing the positive from it. My weakness in Hyrox has always been my running, so it's enabled me to focus wholeheartedly on the running aspect now leading into Nice. So we're what, 2 weeks out from Nice now. Still got the metal splint and everything on my wrist, but I've managed to train around it a little bit, so we'll see how it goes.
Oh, amazing. I mean, it shows the positive mindset that you've spun it around and you can try and focus on the running. But yeah, it's always the way, isn't it? Like, you think you've tried to protect it for so long and think, oh, I'll avoid rugby, and then as soon as you go back into it, there you go.
That's it. That first, it was almost inevitable, wasn't it? When you try and avoid something, it's going to come back and bite you on the bum.
So typical. How do you think you'll be with the farmer's carry and stuff? Can you grip? Like, is it a straight break? Is it quite easy to knit together?
Yeah, so it's the styloid process. So the end of the ulna, the bony bit that sticks out on the outside of your wrist. It's that I've completely fractured. So the end of that's come off, and then 2 hairline fractures in the actual wrist bones themselves. So everything's all lined up still. I managed to persuade the doctors at the hospital to let me just have a metal splinted brace rather than a full cast. I've got to go back and see the orthopedic specialist this week, just to check that they're happy the alignment stayed in place with this rather than a cast, and just to check that there's no need for any surgery or anything. But fingers crossed, all going well. It's been okay. I mean, I've trained still with it. I can still do sled push. I've been doing one arm sled pulls, burpees, just going down on my elbows instead of onto my wrist on that side. The only thing that I haven't tried, and I'm not going to try until Nice, is wall balls. Just because the impact of catching it. But I mean, worst case scenario, we'll just go more dominant on one side and we'll try and do some like 1.5 armed wall balls or something.
Like a basketball shot.
Yeah. So yeah, no, positive attitude.
It might take off, new technique. Like,
that's it. Might alternate and try and save energy on one side or something. Who knows?
Oh man.
Oh yeah, awesome. Oh well, fingers crossed for you. Hopefully it heals well and quickly. But taking it back then, originally you're more strength and conditioning based. You just mentioned there you want to try and improve on your running, but what kind of did sport look like for you back when you were growing up?
Yeah, so I mean, I had a very sort of varied sporting background growing up. I wanted to play absolutely everything. I was quite fortunate that I tended to pick things up quite easily, the skill elements of sports. I was naturally always quite big. I was always one of the tallest in my year growing up. I was always naturally strong, but I never really had an insight into why or how that would help me. I just knew that it was quite cool to be quite big and quite strong growing up. So my main sort of passions really growing up was probably football. Was always my primary sport. I ended up going on to have quite a successful football career, went all the way up to professional levels. But concurrently at the same time as that, I was playing national and international basketball, and also playing sort of county level and above in athletics and rugby as well at the same time. So kind of jack of all trades, master of none. It kind of, if I had focused more on one of them, maybe it would have been a different story, but that I don't like that. That's what I think Hyrox has appealed to me so much in recent years, because it's just the variety of everything. There's not one particular skill or one particular aspect of fitness that helps more than others. It's such a rounded sport. I think that's what I was craving growing up. That's why I played different sports that had very different sort of necessary attributes, because I didn't really fit into one box. I wanted to kind of fit into as many boxes as possible.
I mean, and you did that, and to a high level in like everything. How the hell did you balance all that? Did you have amazing parents that took you to every single sport?
My parents were the most supportive parents. I mean, even school matches for the school, my dad would still come and watch. He just wanted to cheerlead me on everything. Taking me to competitions up and down the country, letting me at I did my first international tournament, I think, when I was 10.
Wow.
So, you know, parents taking me to and from airports and stuff with the teams. And yeah, it was, the support was incredible. The support was definitely something that I think has instilled a massive part of my coaching philosophy now. Always wanted to get behind athletes and willing to travel to watch my athletes, and just the power of that support network behind you is so important. So yeah, I've got to thank them wholeheartedly. Always do anytime I get a chance to.
They must have been buzzing when you went to take your driving test or learn to drive. It must have been like, I think
it's a big relief.
Yeah,
big relief. That's it now. You can go. You can take yourself.
You must have had something every night and every morning.
That's it. Yeah. Oh yeah. It was literally before school, on lunch breaks at school, doing different sporting clubs, getting taken to and from appointments and sessions, and then after school, going again. So, you know, could be doing 3 different sports on the same day, before school, at lunchtime, and after school. And then weekends were just non-existent. I think when I moved out, I think my parents were just thankfully glad to have their weekends back without having to traipse up and down the country somewhere with me.
Yeah, totally. Oh, but that's led you into, well, what you do now. And, you know, you've obviously got that passion and drive for fitness and sport and training. And how do you think from maybe football specifically, how do you think that crossed over into Hyrox and your training?
Yeah, so it's probably more the coaching side of the football that got me more down the Hyrox route. In football, I was actually a goalkeeper, so the fitness element was very different. My sort of fitness training as a goalkeeper was very much strength and power. There was no aerobic elements. There was anaerobic training. We do short, sharp sprints and things like that. Lots of agility and footwork drills. But the actual aerobic base, which you need for Hyrox, I definitely didn't get from football, because I'd be lucky if I covered 2 kilometers in a game playing football, whereas the outfield players were doing, you know, upwards of 12K in professional matches. So it was more, I'd say, when I got into the backroom team of professional football, when I was first team strength and conditioning coach at Wolves, that I sort of discovered this passion, if you like, for tapping into different energy systems and different elements of fitness, if you like, this umbrella term of fitness that people say, well, what is fitness, or what makes someone fit? And that's a question that really used to make me think, well, what actually is fitness? Because is a strongman or a power lifter, are they not athletes, or are they not fit? Because we as society generally think that fitness means running and an aerobic base or cycling. We don't often discover or differentiate the difference between types of fitness and types of athletes. So that was where I kind of dabbled a little bit in my coaching style and introduced little elements within sort of CrossFit into some of the football players who needed a bit more strength and a bit more aerobic capacity at the same time. But then I fast sort of realized that CrossFit wasn't the right route to go for this, because of it was almost too varied for a field-based sport. So that was when then I started to look just into hybrid approaches of training, and then eventually, through friends of friends, stumbled across Hyrox and fell in love.
Yeah, it's like the perfect kind of mix, isn't it? I think
that's it. Yeah.
I be a lot.
I think it's the perfect race. It literally, you know, it encompasses a lot of, if not all of, the different elements of fitness. You know, it's got aerobic elements, it's got anaerobic, it's got strength, it's got power, it's got endurance, it's got that mental resilience that you have to tap on throughout the race, and then it's got a skill-based element in the wall balls at the end, where, you know, accuracy and precision are equally as important when you're at your most fatigued. It's definitely one of the closest things out there to a perfect race, in my opinion, at the moment.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's why it's taken off so much. And I think every time we've spoken to someone on the podcast, and I know probably both of us think the same, everyone's like, oh, I wish this was around when we were younger, because I think most people that are interested in Hyrox who have lent towards it from other sports have been the kind of kids that have done every sport when they've been a kid.
Exactly.
And I think Hyrox has just amalgamated everything together. It's not just being a really fast runner, and it's not just being strong, and it's like putting the two together. And then, like you said, the accuracy at the end when you're absolutely done with wall balls is just that other element that can just, throw your race, can't it?
That's it, absolutely. And I think you see so many top athletes that have come from those sort of backgrounds where it is just constant full send, and the wall balls are their sort of stumbling block because, you know, they're getting no rep after no rep, and, you know, they're probably doing 120 plus instead of 100 in the men's. And the women's category, they're probably doing over 100 in the open instead of 75 because the accuracy is just not there. They're so used to just putting everything into every throw that they're hitting the male target, or they're not hitting the target, or they're so tired they're not hitting depth. And it really can make or break people's races. And I think that's where the simplicity of the event, but the cleverness behind the order of the stations it's been really well thought out, the order of the stations. I think that's something that gets overlooked a lot by the Hyrox community, that each of those stations is where it is for a specific reason, to fatigue a specific part of your body at a specific point within the race. It's not just, you know, they've picked 8 different exercises and thrown them in randomly. There is a very deliberate progression to the body part that they're working. And I think by the wall balls, people underestimate how fatigued their upper body in particular is going to be, coming off the back of the farmer's carry, then into the lunges where people are holding their arms in a sort of ischemic position where the blood flow can't come into their shoulders, and then going into the wall balls. It's almost like a false sense of security that you think, okay, my shoulders feel quite fresh, whereas in reality, it's far from it. And I think that's just, it's brilliant. It's like the perfect oxymoron within fitness of just, I love it. I think it's poetry in a weird way.
I do remember thinking that after our first race, though. I was like, oh, it's going to be my legs on the wall balls, like they're going to be rinsed. And then I was like, oh my God, my shoulders. Like, this is not what I was expecting. But you soon learn.
No, totally.
I wanted to ask, obviously you have smashed the relay, and do you find it difficult to split training for, like, the relay must be so different to competing to a solo event? Like we're signed up to do a relay in October actually, but it'll be the first time we've done one, and it's clearly going to be a hell of a lot more intense too, because it's a hell of a lot shorter because you're splitting it up. How do you find like the training for a relay as opposed to a solo?
To be honest, we never trained for the relay. We literally put that relay team together the night before the race. It was, so I'm probably not the best here. Probably not the best person to ask about this, but the 4 of us were there. We knew each other through social media and things. I mean, I coached Jake, good friends with Charlie. We'd spoke through a lot of the 3 of us and our training together. And then Ash Howell's just a phenomenal athlete who we all knew through the Hyrox community. So it literally came down to the 3 of us, me, Jake and Charlie, were all staying together. And we said, look, should we put a relay team in last minute? So we said, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. And then it was like, okay, well, who else is out here at the moment in Copenhagen that, you know, we'd want to do it with? And Ash's name was the first name that came up for all 3 of us. So we dropped him a message and said, look, are you up for it? The relay was due to start literally an hour after the men's pro. So Jake and Charlie had obviously already done the men's pro doubles, which finished 20 minutes before, and Ash was doing the men's pro singles, which he literally had 4 minutes from when he finished his first ever pro race to get over to the relay zone to do the relay with us. So we had to be a little bit clever with who did what station. So we tried to give Ash as much rest as possible. So we put him on the burpees, which was a good choice because he's phenomenal at burpees anyway. So that probably would have been his station anyway. But yeah, it was just kind of cobbled together. But with the 3 of those having very much running based backgrounds and being very fast runners, we just kind of decided that the technique for it was just, let's just go all in. Let's just hit those kilometers hard. And we worked out, you know, the station and the rock zone and the run is going to be 7 minutes of hell. Let's just go full send. It's 7 minutes of hell. You'll then get about 15 minutes rest before we do our next station. It's another 7 minutes of hell. So let's just go for it and let's just see what happens. And yeah, we did all right. It was it worked quite well on the day. I mean, there was a few things that cost us some time. I mean, all of us probably could have ran quicker had we not all raced that day, particularly Ash having come straight off his first ever pro. He had literally, I won't forget his face when he crossed the finish line. He was sat on the side of the stage, and his fiance took a picture of him and was like, this is literally him now trying to recover for 4 minutes. At least Jake and Charlie had about 15 minutes. They went onto the bike and they just kept their legs sticking over on the bike. And arguably, some people say I had it easy, I had it hard. I'd raced in the morning in the open division. So I'd had like 8 hours, which I'd argue was just as bad because my body had completely stiffened up by that point.
Yeah.
So it was like none of us had an ideal time, but yeah, I mean the race went well. We all managed to run good splits, and yeah, we ended up coming out of it with a good time, 51:14. So
yeah,
it was
amazing.
good.
Yeah, that's crazy, and a British record.
Yeah, it's been broken now though. Unfortunately,
has it been broken? Oh,
it got broke last week at London. The Theta boys, Charlie again, the little traitor.
Oh, he went to another team.
He switched over to another team and they beat us by I think it was about 15 or 20 seconds. But the plan was originally me, Ash, Charlie and Jake were going to be going out to Poland, to Gdansk to do a world record attempt. We were going to try and do it fresh, go out there specifically fresh to try and beat the 48-minute world record. But Ash has had a little knee injury. I've now obviously broken my wrist. So that wasn't to be. So we can't blame Charlie for switching sides.
Next season.
That's it. Next season we're going for the world record.
Yeah, definitely go take it back. But like when you're fresh.
Yeah, that's it.
So taking it back a little bit then. So you talked about you played professional football, then you got into the strength and conditioning, and then somehow you've come over into Hyrox and you're doing coaching. What's the pathway like that? How did you go from being a footballer to doing the strength and conditioning, from being in football to now being over doing just specifically Hyrox coaching, or what? Yeah,
so I guess the journey was from in my playing career, worked my way through sort of academy levels up to scholarship and then professional terms. Always struggled a little bit with injuries. I've always had the mentality that I could probably push my body further than my body is willing to go or physically able to go, which is great for Hyrox now because there's not as many sort of injury risks. But when you're playing contact sports, you know, in football in particular, being a goalkeeper, they always say that you've got to either be brave or not very smart, and it was definitely a mixture of both. I think for me, I used to put my body into places where it probably shouldn't have gone, and ended up having 2 quite catastrophic injuries. I had a really bad shoulder injury that left me with nerve damage down the right side of my neck, shoulder, and into my arm, which I still have now. So I had to have a reconstruction on my right shoulder when I was, how old would I have been there? 18, 19. So that was the kind of career ending one, if you like. That was where I had to take a long time out from football and lost the love for it and lost the sort of desire to get back up to those higher sort of levels of it. And then whilst I was rehabbing that, I went a bit too hard on sort of training my lower body because I couldn't do anything upper body based, and ended up giving myself 4 stress fractures in my back, which I again kind of ignored, tried to train through them, and 2 of them ended up then progressing into full fractures. So then I got diagnosed with a condition called spondylolisthesis. So essentially the L5 and S1 vertebra in my back no longer sit on top of each other like building blocks. My L5 disc is about 75% off my S1. So it's giving me like an excessive lordotic curvature in my back. So that meant that I was pretty much bedbound for the best part of 6 months after that injury. So that kind of made me reevaluate playing any sports at all. Spoke to the guys who I knew within Birmingham City and Wolves about doing some work experience with them once I could. Went off to university, did my sports science degree, did a master's in sports science and medical rehab. Got a internship then through the connections that I had at Wolves as part of my master's. Completed the internship, got offered a job at the end of the internship in the academy. Was with the academy at Wolves for probably 10 weeks, 8 or 10 weeks. As a sports scientist for the under 12s and under 14s, and then got kind of poached, if you like, by the first team manager at the time and head of strength and conditioning there, Tony Daly, asked me if I wanted to work with him in the first team. So they basically created a job. There wasn't a role as a strength and conditioning coach at the time. So they kind of created a role for me to go and work with the first team as the strength and conditioning specialist, which would allow Tony to focus more on the sports science side of it. And then the medical department obviously wouldn't have to worry about rehabbing the players back to fitness. They could focus purely on treating the injuries. Whereas before I was there, the physios would be the ones who'd have to be out on the pitch doing the sort of running and things with the players, getting them back up to full fitness. And then, yeah, from Wolves, I was there then 6 seasons. So went there when they're in League One, left them when they're in Europe. So quite a successful time there. We broke loads of records on injury rates and availability rates. Worked my way up to head of strength and conditioning before I eventually decided that I valued my free time and social life a little bit more than the sort of merits of the job. So I set up my own practice, found a space to create my own studio gym, started coaching footballers one-to-one during the off season, working on their fitness before the seasons get underway, working with injured players, then got a bit of a reputation doing that as a sort of consultant. So ended up then working on a consultancy basis with rugby clubs, hockey clubs, and then it just took off from there, and I ended up having sort of world championship level dancers, cricketers, hockey players, rugby, football, any sport basically, boxers, any sport that needed strength and conditioning, I kind of ended up working with. And that's what then led me to a friend who I used to play rugby with. He was a very talented CrossFitter, and he got into Hyrox. And about 2 years ago now, he qualified for the world champs. And he messaged me and said, look, would you fancy coaching me for Hyrox? And I was like, yeah, great. What is it? And kind of then looked into it, realized what it was, researched how I'd be able to coach them, what the sort of demands of Hyrox would be, did a lot of research then looking into the physiological demands and the psychological demands of Hyrox. Ended up coaching him. He ended up doing really well at Worlds for his age group. Took on a few more clients, made them do well. And then, yeah, it kind of went from there. The next sort of success, if you like, coaching then was met Jake through a family friend. Jake was looking for someone to help take his coaching, his journey in Hyrox to the next level. So started working with Jake. And then went from strength to strength within Hyrox, and then decided it was time that I threw my own hat in the ring and sort of dusted off my sabbatical from playing any sort of sport, and got back into training again myself for more of a purpose. That got me my general fitness back, which got me back into rugby. Had a really successful rugby season, enjoyed it, it was great. And then, yeah, here we are this year. Step back from the rugby to focus on Hyrox, and it's all gone wrong again.
Oh no!
Oh man!
So, yeah, I mean, that's the long version.
That's an impressive resume. Very impressive.
Oh no,
yeah, it's quite a long story, quite long-winded, but it's I feel like whenever I talk to people about who I am as a coach, I feel like it's always important to touch on why I am how I am as a coach, and why my first priority is always the sort of ethos that it is. Don't get me wrong, it's all about training and pushing yourself, and people who follow me on Instagram will know that I've got a bit of a slogan that I always say about my own training, that if it's on the plan, it gets done. Yeah. And I live by that still, but I also, my first and foremost priority for my athletes is to make sure that they are preventing any likelihood of mitigating the chance of injury. I would rather an athlete have to take 1 or 2 days off of lighter training where we do adaptive stuff now than have to take 4 weeks off later in the future because it's progressed into a full-blown injury. You know, it's as much about the consistency of training as it is the actual session content and how hard you train within that session. So I always like to kind of emphasize who I am as a coach, and that don't be like how I was as an athlete, because ultimately that's what ruined my own career, was stubbornness and wanting to push through injuries through fear of not getting signed or not making contracts or not fulfilling potential.
I think, yeah, and I think it's super interesting because you've got both like prongs. You've got the fact that you've been through it and you've been an athlete and you've maybe pushed your body too far, but you've also got the fact that you've rehabbed like thousands of athletes from different sports, or like trained them to prevent injury. And so yeah, those two together, you can really relate to anyone that's coming into training to try and
it's definitely do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think everyone's like that, aren't they? Like we are, yeah.
That's it. I mean, I think I speak on behalf of all coaches that we're the worst for it. We always we'll tell our clients and athletes to do one thing, and then we'll go and do the complete opposite ourselves.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And do you have a coach, or do you coach yourself?
No, well, I bounce ideas off people. I don't have a formal coach.
But someone to keep you accountable, so you don't.
Yeah. So I've got people that I bounce ideas off, and we talk about training and stuff. But I think because of this sounds really sort of naive, and it's something that, again, I tell people not to fall into a trap themselves. But because my body is so temperamental with injuries and with my own mentality, I don't think that anyone would be able to program me in the way that I understand my body myself. So I have to change sessions midway through. Because an old injury will start to hurt, and you know it's one of them where, as I say, I bounce ideas off other coaches, and I value their input massively. And I'm the sort of coach that if I don't feel like I can get the best out of one of my athletes, I will happily bring on another coach's input. I'm not naive enough to think that I know everything, because I don't know anywhere near as much as other coaches out there. So I would always bring in other coaches where I feel it's necessary. And on my own coaching journey, so on my own athlete journey, at some point, maybe I will look to bring on a coach more full time. But for where I'm at with just trying to stay active within sport at the moment without injuries, which I'm failing miserably at the moment, I don't feel like it would be worthwhile right now for me to have a coach program me when I'm having to adapt and change sessions almost every day anyway. That I think that's where the saying, if it's on the plan, it gets done, came from. It was almost like an ironic saying that I will get it done, but it will probably look very different to how it did originally.
Yeah, fair. But I think, we've been through our fair share of injuries, and I think, knowing your body and learning what works for you sometimes is the best way forward. And if you have to adapt. Sometimes just sticking exactly to that session is not always the right thing, or contacting your coach and letting them know exactly how you feel so they understand, so you don't just blindly go down and get everything done.
Exactly. It's got to be a two-way street. That's the other thing that I like to always reiterate with my athletes is it's a two-way street. I can't read your mind and you can't read my mind. I will always tell you exactly what I want from a session. You've got to tell me exactly how you feel within that session, because if we have to change it 10 minutes before you're about to start it, then so be it. We have to get the best out of every session that we can, and that's not always going to look the same. Each session's not always going to be a 10 out of 10. Aside from the fact that you have to obviously periodize and peak for certain times of the year and certain races, as in effort level is not always going to be 10 out of 10. You might not have slept well the night before. You might have been at a family occasion or something. You might not have slept well. So therefore you've tried to alter your session differently, or you've ate differently, or you haven't eaten, or work's been busy. There's a million and one reasons why training might be different day to day. And that's something that's, has to be accounted for. And I feel that's where the communication is the biggest part of a coach-athlete relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that. So what about in general? It can be like coaching tips, or it can be just your experience from racing. Do you have 3 tips for our listeners to help them with Hyrox?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I'd always say to people is have fun. You always race your best when you're having fun. And I mean that even the most serious of athletes, people who are trying to get podiums and get world championships, podiums within world championships, you've still got to have fun. The moment you start taking it, I have to be careful how I say this, because you've obviously got to take it serious, but the moment it overwhelms you because you're taking it so serious that you forget why you're there in the first place, that's when you start to tense up. Your running times will suffer, your heart rate will suffer, psychologically you'll suffer, and you won't be able to push yourself. You will always be able to push yourself harder when you're enjoying what you're doing. As soon as it becomes a struggle, you won't want to push and you won't do well. So no matter what level you're at, you need to enjoy it. You need to remember why you signed up to do that race, and you need to have fun. So number 1 will definitely be have fun. Number 2 is to respect the running. It's a running race with 8 inconveniences along the way, as I like to describe it to people. People, particularly who are new to Hyrox, tend to think that the runs are recovery. And when you get to a point where you can run at a certain pace, yes, you can use the runs as an element of recovery to bring your heart rate down slightly. But they are by no means recovery, and they are tough. No matter how fit you are, no matter how fast you run, those runs are tough. So respect the runs. they are, over 50% of the race when you include the rock zone as well. I think the fastest anyone's ever ran was still more than 50%, including the rock zones. I mean, Hunter's done like a 26 or 27 minute run time. When you add in the rock zone and the fact that he's run a 54 overall, he's still over 50% of the race. Yeah. So, and people who are running, 6, 7, 8 minute kilometers, whatever it may be, for you, it's going to probably be more like 70, 80% of your race. So respect the running, respect the distances. And that leads me on to the third point, which is don't go out too hot. Every coach will say it, and we've all done it still, but don't go out too hot, because once you hit that sort of red zone early on, it's you ain't recovering from it. No matter how much you think you can recover and you try and bring your heart rate back down on stations, you've gone off too hard, too hot, you ain't recovering. So go off easy. There's a bit of a cliche saying that a lot of people sort of are aware of now, which is the race doesn't start till after the sleds. I wouldn't say that's because the sleds are particularly harder than other stations. I know a lot of people will say that it's their worst station, and there's always a lot of controversy regarding sleds. But if you take it as an individual station, I think the reason why people find the sleds so hard is because they've gone off too hot on the first 2 runs in the ski. That they're hitting those sleds way more fatigued than they ever have in training. And I think that's why people struggle more on the sleds than any other station. So I understand the saying that the race doesn't start till after the sleds, but I wouldn't say it's particularly the sleds. I'd say the race doesn't start until you're 20 minutes in. Whatever that 20 minutes looks like for you, it takes 20 minutes for you to get to that point where you can go, okay, I'm at a point now where, this is okay. I feel like my heart's beating out my chest, I'm out of breath, but your body kind of acclimatizes to that and it gets used to it. It's always the shock of your heart rate going up so high that hits you worse than the actual physiological effects of your heart rate being that high, which again brings me on to, I'm going to say a fourth one. Don't underestimate your warm-up.
I was just about to ask that. I was
same.
I was like waiting, and I was like, I'm going to ask about warm-up, because when we were at London, I was shocked at the warm-up zone. Like, well, you go. I'll let you.
Yeah, so what I mean by don't underestimate your warm-up is your chance to get your heart rate up to that red zone, to get rid of that first anticipatory, what's it going to feel like? How's my body going to adapt? How am I going to react to it? And there's a lot of coaches who will tell you about the ramp protocol for warm-up. So raise, activate, mobilize, and potentiate. And the potentiate basically means get yourself ready for as close to the race conditions that you're going to be in. But majority of people are scared to get the heart rate up too high in a warm-up because they think it's going to waste energy. They think they're going to be fatigued and they don't want to do it. But trust me, take it from me, take it from anyone who will tell you the same message, that you need to get your heart rate up that high in the warm-up to get your body ready for what's about to come. It's not just about getting loose. It's not just about avoiding injury. It's about getting yourself ready. It's the same as when you're in a car. You're not going to take a car onto a racetrack and, sit the revs at 2000. You're going to take it all the way up to that red line, because that's what you're going to do when you're racing that car. You've got to get the engine up to temperature, and our bodies are no different. If the first time we hit that red zone is coming onto the ski, we're going to panic. Whereas if you've done it 10 minutes before in the warm-up, your body knows what to expect and there's not as much of a panic going on. So, don't underestimate the warm-up.
Yeah, that is so what I was thinking and wanted to say as well. Because I just was in London. I was in shock. I was like, I think people were just coming in for like 10 minutes and not really doing anything, and then standing on the start line. And I was like, your body is just going to go into ultimate panic mode. Like, you've not even raised your heart rate at all. Like,
I think Hyrox,
in the tunnel. Go on, sorry.
No, go on, Rich. Go on.
So in the tunnel, the athletes who I coach and speak to, and my own heart rate, it's at 150 in the tunnel on the start line. Yeah. It's not, and that's a lot of that's the anticipation when that music comes on. It's like, oh my God, here we go. But a lot of it as well is because you should be going from your warm up. You shouldn't be. I'm not going to put an exact number on it, but from when you finish your warm-up to when you start, it shouldn't be a long period of time. Your heart rate shouldn't have come back down to resting. It should still be elevated. Yeah, we're not talking, your heart rate probably shouldn't be 150, 160. Like, a lot of that is the anticipatory rise and the psychological rise in your heart rate. But your heart rate should be, comfortably into zone 3 when you're on that start line.
Yeah. No, totally. And I think from looking at the warm-up, because we were in there for quite a while, and working on getting our heart rate up. But there's just a lot of people that come in, try a sled. Okay, I can push the sled. Try a pull. Yeah, okay, I've got that. Quick run or a quick ride. Okay, now I'm off. Like, and then that's them. Like
they use it as almost a technique place. They almost use it, and this makes me laugh. They use it to go over to their friends and go, "Yeah, the sleds are moving well today."
Yeah, and it's always about the sled.
That comment always just makes me chuckle to myself, and I've been guilty of doing it before and saying, "Oh, this location, yeah, the sleds apparently move really well here," and then I catch myself saying, I'm like, "What am I saying? Why am I telling myself that?" Like, the sleds are the sleds. They are what they are. They'll move. Like, people give the sleds. I need to be again careful how I word this. I'll upset people, but people give the sleds too much respect. There's too much thought on the perfect technique and the perfect way to attack the sleds. At the end of the day, just go and push it. However that feels right to you, just go and push it, because they will move, and they're the same for everyone there. So if you go up to that sled thinking, "Oh my God, they're not going to move, they're so heavy," well, you're almost telling yourself that the second that sled feels heavy, that you're not going to be able to move it.
Yeah.
So yeah, respect the event, but don't necessarily respect the sleds too much, because they are going to move. They're not as, I mean, for people doing their first Hyrox, I feel like they almost get anxiety about the sleds leading up to the race because of these horror stories they've heard. And you shouldn't be genuinely worried by any of the stations. It can be a least favorite station, but you shouldn't be worried by it. And I think that as a community in Hyrox, we need to stop obsessing so much over the sleds and the carpets and the weights, and just do it and enjoy it.
Yeah, totally.
I just don't know how you ever stop a community of like almost keyboard warriors talking about every race and what's happened, and you're never going to stop it, are you? You never. Everyone's going to talk about the twists and turns in the track, or, "Oh, have you seen this layout, or have you done this?" And I think that's another big thing to take on, is that people probably need to recognize that every race isn't the same. You can't compare every race, because, like you just said, they can't do like for like. At every single race. They can keep the kit the same. They can try and set it up as similarly as they can, but at the end of the day, it's a totally different location with, different formats, different layouts. So you just have to do your best on that day.
Absolutely agree. I mean, until there's conversations being had behind the scenes with the owners about the potential to make it into an Olympic sport. And they're having conversations with the IOC about how that would look. And for me personally, this is just my opinion. I don't have any actual information on what those conversations are detailed. But for me personally, if you want to make it an Olympic sport, it has to be able to be comparable venue to venue. And the only way they're going to do that is if they standardise a 400-metre running track like an athletic stadium, and all the the rock zone is the exact same specification, same size, stations in the same order, and it becomes a completely standardized race. That will make it fair, for lack of a better word, to compare venue to venue. But what you're then limiting is how many races you can have and where you can host them in the world, because not every country is going to have a convention centre or an exhibition centre that you can fit a 400-metre oval track in. And what they want with the vision of Hyrox is to make it accessible to everyone. That's the big ethos. It's fitness racing for everyone. And if that means that we have to put a few kinks in the track to fit it into venues to get more races on for people to enjoy, then personally I'm all for that. That's the way that the sport's got to go. It's about participation. It's about everyone being able to do it in a country or a city close to them. And if that's how it's done, by spreading it across 2 halls within an exhibition centre, and you have to put a dog leg in the course to get the running track or whatever it may be, then unfortunately that's a necessary to make it accessible. So I think we need to focus more on the positives that the Hyrox community and the sport itself is giving us, as opposed to how they can make it better. Because, I mean, look at how fast it's growing. They're obviously doing something right.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? We thought that when we were in London, just the volume of people coming in to race was just unbelievable. Especially I think to watch from above, was it when the women's open doubles went off, the amount of women racing there was just unbelievable.
Incredible.
And the time, I think it was 8 a.m. till 3 or something that the waves were going off. It's just unreal, amazing. They're definitely doing something right, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got the feeling of it's almost got the feeling of like a marathon. It's got your elites up the front, that can run the course really well, but
Yeah.
then it's got everybody else. So and
Yeah.
you've also got your club runners in the middle that are really like quite handy. But then you've also got anybody that wants to try it, and it's open to everybody. And there's not really been I mean, I know there's CrossFit, but CrossFit's quite technical. It's quite skill based. It's got a lot of heavy lifting in it.
Yeah.
It's a lot more accessible to everyone to give a go, isn't it? And something for people to train for.
That's it. And that's what I love about it. The fact that on the same running track at the same time, you can have world record holders and people doing it for charity, wanting to get round in 3 hours, whatever it may be, you know, and they're sharing the track. And for people who are, as you say, that sort of club level, looking to get into the elite levels, they're running around the track with their idols and with their heroes. And, you know, that's something that you don't get in other sports. You don't get Sunday league football players running on the same pitch as professionals in football. You don't get that in any sport, really. So I think that's the motivating part that is incredible about it, that you can literally share the dance floor, so to speak, with your idols.
Yeah, absolutely. And we touched on it briefly when we were talking about the sleds. You said if you think it's going to be heavy, it's going to be heavy. What do you think about kind of physical and mental aspects of Hyrox? Like the split, do you think it's a more mental race, more physical, or what's your opinions or tips for people to kind of strengthen their mindset?
Yeah, so I think the two go hand in hand. Obviously, it is very physical. You can't be someone who's just got an incredible mentality that's never ran in their life and rock up and do well, because you're not going to have the physical capacity to do so. But I think the mindset side of it is very important, especially the higher up the ranks that you go. I mean, if you look at the men's elite races this year, there's probably 30 people that have gone sub 1 hour, and any one of those on their day could go 2 or 3 minutes either side of that time. So when it comes down to a race to qualify for the elite world places, it comes down to mentality and mindset. You know, they're all running similar times. They can all run 3:30 splits on the kilometers. It comes down to who wants it the most. And I think the best example of this was Graham Halliday in one of his races. I think it was the Cologne last round.
Cologne,
He came into the wall balls like out of nowhere. His mindset was, I am not putting that ball down. And he wanted it more than everyone else there. And he overtook like 4 people on the wall balls to get that spot. And I think that shows, one, I know Graham has an incredible physical work ethic. And he trains really hard, and he's such a nice guy. But I think what he has that others don't is that tactical and belief in himself, that he knew tactically that if he was there or thereabouts come the wall balls, he knew that mentally he could push faster and stronger and harder than anyone else on those wall balls. And I think that's where the mindset side of it comes down to self-belief. I don't think there's any trick to it or any special formula. I think it comes down to self-belief. And if you don't believe in yourself, you've got to find a reason to believe in yourself. And one of the best mechanisms for that is looking back on looking back on past successes. You know, when it starts to get tough, when you're halfway around a Hyrox, for people who've done a Hyrox before, just remembering that it felt like this last time, but you still managed to finish. You know, you've done it before. Our voices, when we're in the midst of, you know, the pain cave or whatever you want to call it, the negative chatter is always going to be very strong and very powerful. So you almost have to prepare yourself before the race. I always say to my athletes, and I always try and encompass it in my training, that I run now without music. I won't run with music on. I won't run with headphones in, because I don't want to distract myself from what I'm feeling in that moment. I want to have those voices, those negative emotions come. I want them in my head. I want my voice talking to me in my head going, this is too hard, slow down, you need to stop, so that I know how to deal with them when it then comes to race day. Because everyone's aware now. They say don't change anything on race day, don't do a different warm-up, don't eat different foods, don't fuel differently, you need to do it how you train. Yet people train with music on, they train with, you know, friends and things around them, where on a race day, unless you're in doubles, you're on your own. It's you and those voices. So if you normally run with music on and you're not used to those voices telling you that it hurts, it's hard, you want to stop, how can you expect yourself to befriend those voices and use them as fuel to keep pushing harder? So yeah, I think the mindset is massively important. And I think it comes down to believing in yourself, trusting that your body isn't made of glass and you can push harder than you think. And befriending those voices and expecting those voices, knowing that they will come at some point. I've not done a single race where I haven't wanted to quit at some point, but it's accepting that those voices will come and knowing how to deal with them when they do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. That's a good point.
I've
not really kind of thought about the whole music thing. Like, people do train with music, but then they don't have it in Hyrox. And I mean, I'm sure there is music blaring in Hyrox, but no one has a clue what it is when they're in that pain cave, do they? They're just like, yeah, totally. It's very good answer.
Yeah.
Well,
no, go on.
No, I was gonna say, do you have anything else to add, Faye, before we go on to the cheeky insights?
Yeah, I was just going to touch on Rich's running, because I know he said he's doing more running. You just recently did the marathon, and you've got a 100k race coming up as well.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so for someone who never really ran growing up, it was always on the bucket list to run a marathon. So that got ticked off this year. London Marathon did that. And then, partway through the marathon training, I was like, right, well, just the way the dates are working, the London Marathon's 21st of April. Then got, supposedly I was going to go out and do the relay world record attempt in May. World Champs June. I was like, what's going to happen in July? And I was like, well, my running volume will have stayed up quite high, and I fancy something more of a mental challenge. And Jake's an ambassador for Threshold Trail Series, and they do the Race to the Kings and Race to the Stones. So I was going to do Race to the Kings, the 52k ultra, but Jake was like, no, don't be lazy. That's his favourite saying to me, is don't be lazy. So I was like, okay, let's do the 100 then. So I signed up to do the 100k. So for someone who doesn't run, I've took on quite a bit of running recently.
And did you enjoy the marathon?
Oh, I loved it. I didn't get the time I wanted. I mean, it was still a respectable time. Did it in 3.5 hours. But I was on track for sort of 3 hours 15, which I'd have been happy with as a first marathon. With to put a bit of context to it, 3 months before the marathon, I couldn't run because my back injury had flared up again in January. So my running volume was literally 0 for 3 weeks. I didn't run. So I only really started the marathon prep in sort of towards the end of February, when I got back from Vienna, the European Champs Hyrox. Kind of started prep there, but had a few little niggles with the back. So I only really had like a 4 or 5 week solid block of running leading into the marathon. So yeah, I was on for 3:15, but my quad didn't agree on about mile 22. So I had to kind of limp my way over the line in 3.5 hours. So I mean, it's still a good time. I'm still happy with it, but I will definitely do another one because I loved it. I'm excited. Yeah, excited for the 100k now. I know the 100k is going to be a complete different ball game, but I'm excited.
Got quite a bit of elevation as well, does it? Not too.
I can't actually remember. I did look at the course when I first signed up to it, and it's quite a reasonable amount of elevation.
It's not flat.
Remember? Yeah, no, it's on a trail. It's Europe's longest single trail route, so it's not like up and down like mountains, but there will be natural elevation because it's just through the countryside. You're literally running through fields for however long it takes.
Oh, amazing. It'll be good.
I mean, it beats running around in circles a little bit, so at least like
at least there's an end point
and it changes. Yeah, exactly. No, oh wow, good luck with that. That sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Great challenge. Okay, should we do the cheeky insights?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, we've got 8 questions for you. So first one is, what shoes do you wear to race Hyrox?
So I currently wear Saucony Pro Endorphins.
Nice.
They're wicked. I have worn them since I think I did my first 2 in the DV8 Nitro Elites. Love them. They would be my second recommendation, but then the first time I tried on the Pro Endorphins, I just felt like they gave me so much more feel on the running. I just felt so much more reactive in them, and because of my background in S&C, I can squat and lunge competently, so I wasn't worried that they were maybe slightly less stable compared to the Pumas. So yeah, I run in the Saucony Endorphin 3s.
Perfect. What's your favourite Hyrox venue?
Oh, favourite venue. I loved Stockholm this year. I absolutely loved it. It was probably because it was in December and it was snowing outside.
Oh, nice.
But it was just such an epic venue. It was just really cool. And like there was a hotel built onto it next door, so it was nice and easy. Yeah, it was 2-lap running track, nice, perfect oval. The corners were all rounded off like an athletics track. Really big, nice spread out rock zone, easy to get around, easy to like support friends. So yeah, I'd say probably Stockholm this year. I loved it.
Oh, good to know. Good to know. Okay, next up is, what's your favourite station? Hyrox station.
Oh, this changes depending on what phase of my training I'm in. Sled pull, I'd say. Sled pull. It's always been the strongest, always been my favourite. In that relay, managed to actually do the 7th fastest sled pull ever. So I like the sled pull. That was good. So good.
What was your other relay station?
Lunges.
Lunges, okay.
So I did sled pull and lunges, so 3 and 7. So I had a nice 4-station rest between.
Yeah, that is quite nice.
It was we tried to do it that everyone had 4-station rest between, but yeah, Charlie ended up he did the ski and the row, so he had 4 stations. Jake did the sled push and wall ball, so he actually had 6 stations rest. I did 3 and 7, and Ash, who we were trying to protect the most, ended up doing 4 and 6.
Ash got screwed, didn't he?
He had the least rest as well.
Bless him.
So, yeah.
Oh, he still smashed it.
Yeah. There was a little bit of logic to that though, because the first run in Copenhagen was longer, so we put Charlie on the first run because he's good on the earth as well. So there was a bit of logic behind it. And Ash's 2 fastest stations normally are probably burpees and farmers. So there was logic to it. We didn't just stitch him up.
Okay, if you could do a doubles Hyrox with anyone in the world, who would it be?
Ooh. I would have to say it'd be someone for the fun. So I'd probably want to do it with like maybe someone like Kevin Hart, just someone who would just give you an absolute laugh the whole way around. Because I mean, he's into his fitness as well, so he is fit. He's into his fitness. But I feel like you just have such a good laugh with him the whole way around.
Yeah, you'd need like a microphone on him or something, wouldn't you? Because I just feel like the commentary would be so good to pick up.
Get him mic'd up, yeah.
Love that. Okay, next up is, do you fuel for Hyrox? And if so, what fuel do you use and when?
Big plug for ESN. So yeah, no, I am. Aside from the fact that I am an ESN athlete, so I obviously use all their products, but that was out of choice. I ended up partnering up with them because I love their products so much. So their new endurance range is phenomenal. It's a really simple 3 product stack. It's got your base, which you take every day, which has got your like creatine and things like that in daily vitamins. You then take your pre-race, which has just got some carbs in and some, minerals and things to help with the race, and then the recovery has got your carbs and protein in. They're the supplements I take. So creatine and beta-alanine are the 2 main supplements really for Hyrox. I then fuel with things like beetroot juice, just to get extra nitrates in. But other than that, I'd say for people, it's literally what you do every day. You know, a Hyrox. Maybe if you're someone who does Hyrox more for fun and it's going to be taking you, closer to say that 2-hour mark and above, then maybe you do need to look at fueling slightly differently. Maybe look at taking gels around with you and stuff. But for the majority of the athletes who I coach are around that sort of 55 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes. That's how long you train for in the gym anyway, or on a track session anyway. So you don't really need to change too much as long as you're getting adequate carbs in and you're fueled adequately the night before and on the day of the race. There's not too much you need to change. The only thing that is worth noting is your start times. And kind of working backwards from your start time. Don't just think that if you're racing at 4 o'clock that, you'd have your breakfast and lunch like normal. Or if you're racing at 11 o'clock, you'd have just your breakfast as normal. I always like to tell people to work backwards. So that's something that in the football industry, we used to always work backwards from kickoff. So we'd have match day -1 the day before, match day -2, 2 days before. But then on match day, we'd have hours working back from kickoff. So 1 hour before kickoff, the players would have their sort of pre-workouts and stimulants. 2 hours before kickoff, they'd have their last carb sources. 3.5 hours before kickoff, they'd have their last protein source. 5 hours before kickoff, and there was always a timeline working back. So we knew no matter what time of the day they kicked off, their lead up to that kickoff time would always be the same. And that's what I try and utilize in my racing. I always tell my athletes to do the same, that no matter what time of day you're racing, just work back, count back the hours of when you need to be having your last meal, your electrolytes, etc., etc.
Yeah, perfect. That's Clever, yeah. Yeah, it's because like that is the thing with Hyrox, you never know what your start time is going to be until quite close to the race. So no, very good tip. Okay, next is, what's your favorite type of training session for Hyrox?
As in like an actual session or just style of session?
Either, but style generally.
So I love doing AMRAP style stuff. Set a timer, many rounds as possible, and just push yourself. Within that, I like to incorporate that as a sort of, in speech marks, compromised running session. I kind of fall in and out of love with that phrase, compromised running, because the more I think about it is how important actually is it? Because all compromised running really is the ability to run sub-maximal under fatigue. If you train your maximal running without fatigue, your sub-maximal under fatigue is naturally going to improve with it. And I go through these phases with my athletes where we will emphasize compromised running, and I will always do it with people because you've got to practice what you do on the day. So you've got to practice that. But I always then have this like inner turmoil and battle with myself that how many compromised sessions should they be doing compared to pure speed and pure endurance work? But having said that, it is definitely my favorite session is the compromised running, because it's that feeling that you get on race day of trying to run when your legs feel like they're twice as heavy as they should be. And you're fighting those voices in your head that are saying it hurts, and you're fighting your natural cadence, and you're trying to get into a natural running routine and rhythm despite your legs not wanting to move the way that you want them to. So yeah, I'd say my favorite session for Hyrox is compromised intervals within an AMRAP.
Nice. I mean,
I like that.
Nice.
we were talking about compromised running the other day, weren't we? And we were like, there's a lot of it. And if you were just getting into Hyrox, that is what all the running sessions seem to be like: compromised running. But you still need the standard. You still need to run faster. You still need some long runs. You still need to just work on your running, because if you're a faster runner, you're going to be faster in Hyrox.
Exactly. You're not going to get. It's like sprinting. You're not going to become faster at sprinting by running at 70% of your max speed with heavy legs. It's not going to happen. The way that you get faster at something is by running faster. So if you want to improve your run splits, you need to have a faster run split when you're fresh.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we say that the average sort of compromised run during a Hyrox is somewhere between your 10K and your half marathon times, in terms of splits that you can run. If we improve that 10K running time and those half marathon times, you're going to improve the speed that you can run at compromise, because your body is adapted to running at faster speeds. So your 70% of your maximum speed has naturally improved also. So I think for me, I'm starting to sway more towards the compromised running element of training is more to get used to your running gait and running style under fatigue, as opposed to it being the actual factor that can make you run quicker during a Hyrox. Okay. And that's something that I think a lot of biomechanists will agree on, that when our legs are fatigued, our go-to mechanism should be to reduce vertical oscillation. So reduce the contact time on the floor, producing vertical impulse, and try and create more of a horizontal impulse. And we do that by increasing cadence. And that's something that you can practice by running faster on a track, not running under fatigue. So yeah, it's something that I think needs to be in training programs, but I think is overly emphasized by a lot of coaches nowadays.
It's like a buzzword in Hyrox at the moment, isn't it?
Like zone 2. The other
and zone 2.
Okay, next up is, why do you think someone should sign up for their first Hyrox?
Because it's the best sport ever. It's as simple as that. No matter what ability you are, no matter what level you are. I mean, I've got clients who've got goals for next season who they want to do it in 2 hours. And, you know, you see people on the day who do it in those sorts of times, and they have the most fun out of everyone because they're doing it for fun. It's not a professional sport where you have to be incredible at it. You know, I think I've seen somewhere there's people who've done it in almost 4 hours. And, you know, and it's like, that is what is so beautiful about it as a sport, is that it is genuinely for everyone. So the only reason I think people would not want to sign up is because they think that they'll look out of place or they won't enjoy it. You get out of it what you want. If you want to go there and have fun with it. Walk the whole thing. Take 30 minutes to do the burpee broad jumps. Have a laugh and a joke on the way around. Like, that is the beauty of it. You've got no reason to not do it, to just do it.
Yeah, love it.
And that's coming from a guy that's done every sport.
Yeah, literally.
So...
literally. And this is my favourite.
And then lastly, is there anyone that you would love to see on our podcast that you'd like to hear more from, or a type of person that's competing in Hyrox or something like that?
I would like to hear the perspective of someone who is pure runner, stepping into. I think the majority of the people who you see come into Hyrox come from the sort of CrossFit background. They come from the strength and power background and have to learn how to run. I would love to speak with or see the thoughts of a class runner and their input, how they've had to adapt their running training to get stronger and put on muscle mass. Someone like Ash Harrell, who has got a GB running background. You know, he was GB cross country and he's got a phenomenal running background. And he won't mind me saying, when he stepped into Hyrox, he really struggled with the wall balls in particular because he's quite short as well. So yeah, someone like Ash, you know, or any international level runner, I'd love to hear their input on how their training is different to try and put on the strength and the stamina on the strength endurance side of it, as opposed to the more traditional CrossFit entry of hybrid, where they've come from more strength and power and they're having to work on their running.
I think that's super interesting, isn't it? And there's in the, you might know his name, Rich, I can't remember. Is it Plato? Is he Spanish? He's like an Iron Man. He's quite interesting from that side, because you can tell that he's obviously not as strong as some of the other guys, but he's an 8-hour Iron Man competitor. So you think, God, for him coming into, and he's qualified, hasn't he, for the Elite 15? I think.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he qualified or not.
Yeah, I can't remember. But he was incredible in the. Yeah. Oh, he did the Elite 15 at one of the majors, didn't he? And he just his running and his aerobic base, he was just the runs just must have felt like nothing for him. He didn't. Yeah. He does a ridiculous marathon at the end of an Ironman. So you wonder how it plays out for him. It's the same thing, just coming from different sports.
I think that's where there probably is a slight advantage to people with a running background, and I think we'll see it over next season. I think we'll see a lot more runners getting involved in Hyrox, because if a 3:30 kilometer is genuine recovery pace for them, you know, they can go full send on stations because they're getting their heart rate back down. Whereas a 3:30 for someone like me is that's jacking my heart rate up, not down. To run a 3:30 in a Hyrox, I mean, when we did the relay, I think I ran like a 3:08 and I hit the station. My heart rate was already in the 180s before I even started the sled pull. Whereas you've got guys out there that can run sort of 3:20 splits and it'd be bringing the heart rate down. So
it's mad.
I think that if you can find the perfect athlete out there, and I think that's where Hunter's aerobic base from his cross country days running when he was younger, and then his general just such a phenomenal base in OCR and in Spartan racing and things like that, that, you know, he's running seriously quick at the moment. And without getting into too much detail, he's going to do something special before the season's out, and the times that he's running at is quite frightening. And it is even more frightening that he's running those times and then hitting the stations as hard as he does. So I think the running side of things is really interesting to see what an out and out, I'm stumbling a bit here because I'm trying to think whilst talking what the ideal running distance athlete would be for Hyrox, and I'm starting to now actually think maybe it would be like a male decathlete. Maybe someone who's got that repeated endurance, because they have to run a 1500 at the end, and they're running 3:45 1500s, 4-minute 1500s, probably not 3:45, probably just over 4-minute 1500s at the end of 2 days of competing.
And they've got the explosive strength.
They've got the explosive strength and power,
and they've got the agility and
But maybe they do too much sprint work, because they obviously do 100, 110 hurdles. Maybe they do too much shorter stuff. Maybe it'd be like a 5K or a 3K steeplechaser or something. I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where the sport goes, I think, because it's so young right now. It's, you know, from different people enter from different sports and different backgrounds. Absolutely. It's very much in the hybrid world now, isn't it? Like the OCR, the CrossFit, maybe some runners, but it's only going to expand and get more people from different sporting backgrounds, and then that's when it gets interesting, doesn't it?
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Oh man, well, that was incredible. So much information.
Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate your time. If people want to reach out to you, follow you, maybe speak to you about some coaching and stuff, where do people find you, Rich?
Yeah, so easiest probably on Instagram, rich.kirby.elite.performance. Or my website is quite simple, www.rkep.co.uk. My email is on my website. There's a link on there just to drop me an email. But generally, I'm probably more responsive on Instagram anyway. So yeah,
Perfect. And they can watch your journey to the Hyrox and the 100K as well.
There's a lot of my personal journey on there, as well as like coaching tips and what my athletes are doing and training and stuff and things like that. There's a lot of my personal training on there as well. So yeah.
Perfect. Ace. Well, thank you for your time.
No, thanks for having me.
Thanks to everyone for listening, and yeah, give Rich a follow, share this episode. There's so much information out there that are gonna help people, whether they're just getting into their first Hyrox or whether they're trying to get a PB and they want to try and improve in certain aspects, especially the running. And yeah, give us a follow over on Instagram as well at Radchicks, and we will see you on the next episode.